So I would say I had a unique childhood. When I was probably in second, or when I was probably 2 years old, maybe three, my two biological sisters and I were taken to Tennessee by my mom. We were born in Iowa, but our mom took us to Tennessee and put us in a foster family situation. So we lived in Spring Hill, Tennessee at a children's orphanage where there was like about 100 other kids. And every so often they'd find a foster family that wanted 3 girls, which was rare. So we'd go to several different foster families, find out we don't want 3 girls under 5 and under. So we would go back to the orphanage, and that happened several times. So we bounced back and forth from orphanage to foster care for several years. Then my biological father, who didn't know we were taken by my biological mother to this foster situation, finally found us, got us back. We were wardens of the state of Tennessee for years. He finally got enough money to buy us back. So then we moved to Forest City and lived with him, and I was probably in second grade. So my sisters and I lived with him for a few years, and that did not turn out great. He was an alcohol abuser, physical abuser, and so that went south pretty fast. So we lived there until our school system found out that we were being abused, and they took us to family members. So we got to move to Anamosa and lived with my grandma for a while. And a friend asked me to spend the night one night when I was probably 16, maybe 15 at the time. And so I spent the night, and then another night, and then I never left. So one day her mom came downstairs, and my friend's mom said, "Hey, noticed you haven't left in a few days. What's going on?" So I gave her an explanation of my home life, which I was living with my grandma, and my grandma also had at the time been taking care of several of my cousins. So my grandma was overwhelmed. We were sleeping on the floor or outside in the summer because it was too hot. And so once my friend's mom kind of heard about that day, she got the van and went to my grandma's house in a garbage bag and loaded me up. And then I moved in with a friend at 16. So I lived there for a few years, then went to college, and somehow made it out of just that situation from my biological family. And at the age of 21, I was technically adopted by my now family. I don't know. I think it turned out really good for me. Built character, all the good stuff. So it's not a sob story or a victim story for me.
No.
So
It's amazing.
And so as an adult, I think my spiritual reawakening, I could say, happened as soon as I had kids. If you don't believe in God after you have a kid, I mean, that's the craziest thing. So I got connected with the Cedar Falls Bible Conference through my good friend Jen, and her and I used to live next to each other. And one day I had a kid. She was probably 1 at the time or younger, and she would always say, "Just come play in our playground outside." So we'd always just sneak in their backyard and use their swing set, and that just sparred this friendship between us. And so through just dialogue, one day she just said, "Do you want to do a Bible study with me?" And it was just almost like I jumped on her and hugged her like, "Yes, I do." And it's just not a natural conversation. But Jen made it seem so natural to just say, "Do you want to do a Bible study with me?" So I did, and we've been doing that for years together, just her and I, and we've added girls and, done kind of evolved it. But then she also invited me to come to the Bible conference, and I sat through a few seminars or what are they called? Sessions. Yeah, and really enjoyed it. And then the following year, I just came on my own, and I invited some friends, and some girlfriends came to the women's sessions, and that's kind of how I got started, was through my friend. I would say that this year I got connected with the Bible conference more than ever by the Retreat House Project with Jess Hansen. So her and I she started it, and she asked me to help just progress the retreat center into something more, that it had so much potential to just show the hospitality of Jesus and really just use that space. And she knew that I had history in graphic design, art, photography, and just my skill set. So her and I jumped in. We started that project, which led me to being on the grounds more, just feeling at peace more with it, this place set apart. And so I keep talking about it with other friends, and you know what I can do? I can do one more thing. Oh, I can help with this table project, or it just kept evolving and snowballing, and I can't tell you exactly why I'm out there every day, if it's the Spirit or what it is, but I love to be there. It's hard to describe. As a Cedar Falls person, I didn't know about it. I live right by there, and I would drive by thinking, what is that? That's Look at all those weird small houses. Why are they so little? Oh, they're cabins. Am I supposed to be there? Is this a thing? So that's how my like baseline. What is the Bible conference? That's what I know. That's what most of my friends know. So when I got invited out there and I thought, oh, this is great. That message was great. I wasn't expecting what I got out there. So that's kind of started the snowball of the evolution of how come I'm out there so much.
So when we sat down to record that video, my intention was to get a little bit about why Bobby has been out here helping so much leading up to the Bible conference, and I had no idea about her past, and so we got into that, and what an amazing work the Lord has done in her life. And I've said this throughout the week. I don't know if you've been here to hear it, but more than ever for me, this year we've had more people pulling the same direction and on the same page than ever before. Bobby is an example of a volunteer. She's not on our ministry team. She's not on the board. She's not a paid staff member. There are several people like Bobby who've chipped in this year. And then you've got the ministry team and the board and the staff and everybody not just getting ready for this conference this year, but really starting to get excited about a bigger vision for this entire ministry. And so I've said this over and over, and I'm sorry to bring it up again, but our primary goal right now is to update this facility, this event center. We need to put a new floor in here. We need to put restrooms inside. So guys, I just saw Jim Wallace walking by to use the restroom. Our speakers don't need to walk outside to go to the bathroom, or our attendees. We think there's about a $200,000 or $300,000 price tag on getting that done. We've got about 70 of that raised so far. And I would love to see us celebrate our 100th year in an updated facility. What that also does is provides us with the opportunity to use this place more than once or twice or 3 times a year. If it was available year-round, you'd have groups coming in here doing all kinds of cool ministry events, creating demand for cabins, which creates some revenue for the ministry through the rentals and so on and so forth. So we got to get that project done. And you can be involved with that by donating in one of these gray envelopes. They're on the big wooden table in the center back of the auditorium, and it's addressed to Riverview Conference Center. So any gifts that go to Riverview Conference Center and you earmark for the event center upgrade will go toward that. And we would strongly encourage you to do that and do that soon. You can also support our Bible conference, the 8-day conference, with donations in the boxes here with the blue stars on them. We're not passing offering plates like we have in the past, just trying to be sensitive with the whole virus thing. I can tell you, and frankly, I'm not scared about this, but I can just tell you that we're tens of thousands of dollars behind where we were last year at this time. Our goal is to raise $150,000 for the 8-day conference in calendar year 2020. We expected our numbers to be down this year because we expected attendance to be down. And so you'll be hearing from us again throughout the year to meet that goal. The Lord has provided for this ministry for 99 years. He's going to continue to do it. But I just lay that need out in front of you so that you can pray about how the Lord might be moving you to partner with us in that. And thank you ahead of time. I want to thank Nancy Grand, who played preludes for us every night. Where's Nancy at? Thank you. She put a lot of work in, and when Phil Falsgraf, who normally leads worship for us in the mornings and plays preludes at night, great organist and pianist, when he told us he couldn't make it this year, we kind of looked around and said, who's going to fill that slot? And when I was just listening to Nancy's prelude tonight, I grew up out here coming to the Bible conference, and that just was, it just felt Bible conference, that piano prelude, kind of a big piece. So very well done, Nancy. Thank you. Nancy's part of our Cedar Falls Bible Conference ministry team. I'm going to ask everybody else who's on that team to stand up. Doris, I see you back there. Mike, just stand up if you're on the ministry team. Wanda's back at the concession stand. These guys have done a ton of work. Joe, Ann, Darwin, Arlen, Steve, Steven in the sound booth. Chris is back there doing parking. These guys don't get paid a dime, and I feel guilty because I do get paid a little bit, and they work just as hard as me in many ways, and so this would not have happened. I mean, these guys stepped up bigger than ever this year, and so praise God for them, and thank you. The concession stand will be open tonight, and we still have some Cedar Falls Bible Conference merch, some tumblers, some mugs, some T-shirts. Got a few large T-shirts left, and that stuff's all marked down a little bit. And if you want to just help us clear out the pop and the the candy at that concession stand, that's going to be good for us to get rid of it. And it's going to be good for us to spread those calories out, across everybody, instead of me just taking home like 50 cans of pop. So that'll be good. Tonight after the session, Here's What's Poppin' is going to be serving popcorn. We're going to do another mini concert with Christy Knuckles, just like we did last night. We're going to do a little bit of a Q&A after Jay Warner's message like we did last night. And then there'll be about 10-minute turnaround, and we'll come back up here for the concert. I would just say that if you're not here to watch the concert, it would be better if people don't hang around in the back and talk, because that happened last night. It was a little bit distracting, not a huge deal. But if you want to watch the concert, come watch the concert. And if you want to hang out and talk, go outside and do that. Want to promote one more time the CC podcast, the Christian Crusaders table back there. We've got 3 podcasts. One is a daily devotion. One is the radio broadcast that we've done for 84 years. And the other one is a podcast with interviews that I do with several different people, namely Ron Gruber from earlier. We've got a podcast on there, and some others will be adding to those. And so you can subscribe to that wherever you listen to podcasts. And my goodness, I think that is it. We're going to watch a video briefly about what we're going to do at 6 o'clock on Sunday night for the next 10 Sunday nights. And we'd invite you to that starting tomorrow night down in Fellowship Hall.
We live in very difficult times today. I believe that God has called us to engage the world around us, not in the way we've been doing it, but in a new and fresh way, the way He wants.
Engagement is another invitation to gaze upon the face of God, taking all the worldview stuff that we've gone through, and now, okay, what are we going to do with this?
Dr. Sackett teaches in a way that is very engaging and charismatic and captures your attention.
He has straight interviews, he has expert interviews.
You'll see illustrations and animations.
He's really a great tour guide, bringing us along this journey to gaze upon the face of God.
I really think it's important for God's people to come together, and so that's why we're delivering this in a small group format.
The small group setting is great because it's personal, it's real, it's hands-on.
It just stirred us, it stirred me.
I really found it to be beneficial to be in a room with individuals that know me, that can continue the challenge when the video turns off.
The content changed me because I can't love the same. Like, I need to love sacrificially and with a zeal.
I called my wife and I said, things are going to change. We need to talk.
It's just been exactly what I needed to hear, when I needed to hear it, in the environment I needed to hear it in.
The Engagement Project is to help people understand why we're still here. I think it will transform their lives, the families, and the world around us.
Consider yourself invited to that 6 o'clock tomorrow night in Fellowship Hall. Also, if you want to be on our email list, we're going to send links out to most of our sessions. They're going to be archived on our YouTube page. We're going to give kind of final update. Fill out one of these contact cards. Make sure we've got your email address, and that'll be good. Okay, I want to have a chance to send you a greeting from some friends of ours. Senator and Mrs. Grassley are here. Can you guys stand up a second? I was just thinking, we are in our 99th year. I think you've been at all of them, right, Senator?
Yeah, you bet, yeah. I've been to everyone since 1974, so 46 years, at least one time every year.
So, come over here. So I was here on Sunday. Barbara, you've been here a few times this week. Your attendance record is a little bit better than this guy. Why do you keep coming?
Here and he wasn't.
That's right.
Yeah, he just.
Oh, you were in town.
Oh yeah, I was.
He says he was working. I don't know. Working for the people, right?
These people know better. We don't get enough done in Washington, D.C. I might as well admit it.
So tell me, why do you keep coming back to the Cedar Falls Bible Conference?
because you hear the word of God here, and it's been going on for 99 years. Next year will be 100. And so it's just really so moving. And as he said, since 74, that we've been coming. And so it just, you hear different ministers who come and help us understand the word of God in different ways. And it's just what we need to do every day.
I was saying to the senator before the service tonight, now more than ever, do you need to be any more convinced that really the only stable things we have to build on are the Word of God and the gospel? What would you say about that?
The message of salvation is not only 2,000 years old, but until the Lord comes again, it's going to continue to be the only certain thing we have in life.
Amen. I love these guys. They've given me access to their lives over the years. I remember my very first and best memory is when I was in college at UNI. We had a large group gathering called Basic, and we put this thing together. And it was on Thursday nights every week. Several hundred students came, and one of the leaders decided that for the Thursday before Easter, they were going to invite Senator Grassley to come and give the Easter message. And I thought, I knew Senator Grassley and Mrs. Grassley were good people. I'd been with them before that, but I thought, goodness gracious, a U.S. senator who's up for election every once in a while certainly isn't going to say what needs to be said at Easter, which is that people are sinful and headed to hell, and the only way they can be saved is through faith in Christ. I'm telling you what, this guy delivered an Easter message that is better than a lot of them I've heard from ordained ministers. And so ever since then, I realized these guys are the real deal. They're not playing games. Not only do you mow your own yard, but you truly walk with Jesus. And we appreciate that. Thanks for being here. All right. We got one more session with J. Warner Wallace, and it's been great. And I'm not going to say a whole lot more other than he had a large chocolate shake from Four Queens before the session tonight. So he's hopped up on something. I don't know.
I want to thank Matt. Now that I listened to all that Matt's talking about the facility, I just want to thank him for inviting me here while it was still a lame facility, a year before you're actually going to improve the place. I enjoyed the walks out to the restroom. It was very nice. Okay, tonight we're going to finish by taking a look at some of the evidence for Christianity. Last night, if you were here, we talked about things that really demonstrated the existence of God, but didn't necessarily demonstrate that Christianity was true. So I wanted tonight to take a different approach and talk specifically about the evidence for Christianity. Now, if you weren't here last night or you weren't here this morning, I know I have to do this once in a while. I get tired of saying it too. I want to tell you why I take the approach I take. I take this approach because this is how I was kind of brought up. I was the son of a cop, and I watched him work cases when I was young. Some of those cases didn't get solved. So when I became a cop, I started working his cases. I was looking forward to solving some of my dad's old cases, let me tell you, just so I can rub it in his face, right? And so a lot of our cases are on Dateline. We've got a full list of cases there. You can take a look and see. I've been on Dateline more than anybody else. So these cases teach you something that now my son is trying to press into service using the same tools that I used before him and that my dad used before me. All of us have the same name, Jim Wallace. We've been working at the same agency in Los Angeles County for 60 years, since 1961. So what we're going to do is talk about now specifically tonight some of the stuff that I talked about in God's Not Dead 2. We're going to give you a more robust view of why Christianity is the one theistic worldview that is true compared to all the others. Now, this is all from a book, Cold Case Christianity. You know, in our city, we get called out anytime someone is dead, whether it's a murder or not, if it's suspicious. And we are called to take a report. It's called a dead body report, a DBR. And we get called to DBRs often, and I've had a bunch of these. And when the patrol officers are called, they have to go and see if it's a homicide or just you talked about this last night a little bit, and we'll talk about it again tonight. We had one of these cases several years ago where the officers were called out to the scene, and they were told that the woman was dead in her bed, and they recognized the address and the name right away because they had dealt with this couple for years. They had dealt with this woman for years. I had arrested her for bank robbery years before this, and she was a committed addict. a committed heroin addict. And when they got there, she was dead in her bed, and this was her nightstand. I'll give you a close-up of it so you can kind of get a sense of it. So, she's doing heroin, so she's got these heroin needles here and here and here. But if you just do heroin, it's a depressant, so you're going to need something to kind of stabilize you. So she also smokes rock cocaine at the same time. These are her rock pipes. If you do this combination long enough, bad things happen. So when our officers got detailed to this call, that she's now dead in her bedroom, and they see this as her nightstand, what do you think they presume is the cause of death? Right. Okay. So they call the coroner out because they got to collect the body, and so they wait for the coroner's investigator in Los Angeles. If you wait, you're going to wait an hour and a half. Finally, someone's going to get there. They're waiting around an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half. 2 officers in her bedroom just talking, waiting for the guy to get there to collect the body. Coroner's investigator gets there, pulls down the blankets, and she's been stabbed to death. They didn't even bother to pull the blankets down because they thought they knew the answer before they arrived. If you presume you know how this is going to turn out before you even start an investigation, then get ready. You're probably going to miss it. You're probably going to misinterpret something, or you may not even pull the blankets down to look any further because you think you already know the answer before you start looking for answers. I want you to keep this in mind because what we're trying to do at all these death scenes is figure out what is the most reasonable explanation for how she died. What is the most reasonable inference from evidence? Because I told you, I said it how many times now, this is the judicial standard. Not beyond a possible doubt, because we'd never convict anybody. It's beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's lower than possible doubt. Reasonable doubt's down here. Does that make sense? Okay. The question tonight is, how do we ever determine what is reasonable to begin with, though? And that's what we're going to do. How many were here last night? Raise your hand. Oh, a lot of you, right? Okay. Do you remember my dead body? Okay. We're going to kill him a different way. I promised you we would kill him a different way tonight. So we will. Introducing dead body. This is my son Jimmy, as I told you last night, posing as a dead body. And we're going to kill him a slightly different way. And I use this illustration to talk about a process that we call abductive reasoning. Do you remember that from last night? Basically what we're doing is we're making a list, a list of evidence and a list of explanations. And then we try to figure out which explanation fits the evidence best. Now, right now, as you know, we just have a dead guy laying face down. And there are 4 ways to explain dead guys laying face down. Do you remember from last night? Okay, so what are the 4 ways? Natural, accidental, suicide, someone said. And what's the last one? That's right. These are the 4 ways that people die. Our only question is, which of these 4 explanations is best? And as it is here, as you know, we really can't decide yet because he could be any one of those 4. Heart attack, accidentally took too many pills, purposely took too many pills, was poisoned with too many pills. Either way, he would look like this. So we will change it. As you notice, to start it simply like we did last night, we're just going to put that pool of blood around him. So that I get that. That's simple. So now we're just going to add that one additional dimension, and we now can cross out natural because we cannot imagine how you could bleed center torso naturally. Is it possible? Yes. Is it reasonable? No. And that's why we're crossing it out. Are we clear so far? This is all reviewed from last night. But now I want to change the scenario slightly. Do you remember how he died last night? Yeah, we shot him, right? What if now he's laying in that pool of blood, center torso, with a big honking knife sticking out of his back? That would change the scenario, don't you think? So now I can take a look and I can rule out accidental. Kind of hard to imagine how you could accidentally back into that knife like that, perfectly vertical, right? That's weird, right? But it is low enough in his back that I could even accomplish that, as stiff as I am. And you see all kinds of crazy suicides when you work this job because sometimes people are high when they commit suicide. So you see weird stuff. So we're going to leave that in. But if he had multiple stab wounds in his upper back, that's harder to explain. And of course, that would be, unless you're incredibly flexible and have a really high tolerance for pain, I'm guessing you could probably rule that out. And of course, as we said last night, if you had footprints leading out of the room, now you really know you can rule it out. Make sense? Okay. This is how we inferred that this is the most reasonable inference, just like last night. By the way, this is Jimmy alive today. Okay, he's still good, still alive. He and I both went to UCLA, so we're both Bruins. Okay. my son David went to USC, so he's a communist, okay? That's how that works. We have a rivalry in the family, and they have been killing us for years, and I'm really upset about it. But anyway, the point is, this is how I drew it in Cold Case Christianity. This is called abductive reasoning, like we talked about last night. It's called abductive reasoning, or inferring to the most reasonable explanation. This is what detectives do, officers do at death scenes to determine if it is a homicide or a suicide or an accidental or whatever. And this is what we ask jurors to do. Simple principle. Why do I mention it again tonight? Because this is how I, at 35, began to investigate the case for Christianity. I did not believe it was true, and I didn't even think it was worth my time. I've got a friend named Lee Strobel who wrote The Case for Christ. Now, Lee's a great guy, and he was trying to prove his wife, Leslie, was wrong because she became a Christian first. That wasn't my story. I didn't think this was even worth investigating. Like, who investigates whether or not the Easter Bunny is real? What's the point of this? That's what I thought of all of this stuff. It was not worth my time. But as I began to read the New Testament, I thought, could I apply this approach, not to a dead body here, but to the empty tomb? Because that seemed to Paul, at least, to be the most important piece of Christian evidence. He talks about this in 1 Corinthians 15. He says, hey, if this is not true, if the resurrection did not occur, number one, you have no hope of your own resurrection. But more importantly, we have been false witnesses. We've been lying to you, and you bought it. You're to be pitied because none of this is true. So I'm like, okay, great. So if there's one thing I need to investigate to determine if Christianity is true, it really is this. Did the resurrection occur? Because if this is just a matter of personal opinion and it's all good for you in Iowa, but it's not so good in New Jersey, then guess what? We're never going to figure this out. We're never going to be able to reconcile this. But if Christianity is objectively true, right, Norm? Objectively true. If it's objectively true, it transcends both of these states, all of us, all across the nation, and across the world. And it's the one unifying truth that can bring us together. But is it objectively true? That's what I needed to know. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to use abductive reasoning. We're going to list the evidences in the room, and then we're going to list the explanations for the evidence, and we're going to see which explanation works best. That's how you always decide these cases. So why would I take a different approach? Same approach. So the question is, what is the evidence in the room? Now, I was a very committed atheist, and I really still understand there's still a bunch of stuff that I can relate to from an atheistic perspective. And I would have said to you, I'm only going to accept certain things as evidence in the room. You could say what you want about Jesus, but I was not going to believe all your story. But I would have said, okay, I agree with this. I would have agreed that, yes, there's a guy, I'm not a Jesus myther. Okay, I believe that Jesus lived. Even Bart Ehrman, the skeptic, I told you about earlier today, even Bart has written a book against the Jesus mythers who don't think that Jesus even lived. Yeah, Jesus lived, okay, so he died on a cross. Who cares? People are dying on crosses even today. And he was buried. Okay, this is unremarkable to me. And this does not mean Christianity is true. This could be true, and Christianity could still be false. But I'll give you that, but so what? I would also have said, the tomb is empty, because if you want to end this in the first 5 minutes, here's what you do. You get the body of Jesus and you drag it around town, you show he's not risen. Or you get the people who say he rose to recant. Either one of those would end it. Yet they were never able to end it. So I would give you this too. So what? The tomb is empty. Does not mean Christianity is true. This could be true. This could be true. Christianity could still be false. Because I can explain the empty tomb in a number of different ways. I would have also said, yeah, these people said they saw him arise. People say all kinds of stupid things. This does not make it true just because some idiot says it. So, okay, this could be true. This could all be true. Christianity could still be false. And yes, they were committed to their beliefs. So what? People fly planes into buildings because they're committed to their false beliefs. This does not make it true. But I would have said, this is where I stood. This is all I would have given you as an atheist. This is all I would have given you. I'll give you those 4 things. No more. But then I have an obligation to explain what my theory is, to explain these 4 things. And I would have given you one of 6 possible explanations. 6 that are the atheist explanations. And the last one, number 7, is your Christian explanation. I wasn't going to give you your Christian, but I would have said one of those top 5, 6, somewhere in there. I would have picked one of those. So what I want to do tonight is just examine a few of these with you to see if they're reasonable and show you how I got back to the Christian explanation, okay? The first explanation is, what if they're just wrong? He's not even dead. Look, if you're just badly beaten and you're unconscious, I have a resuscitation but not a resurrection. Make sense? Get him off the cross, get him into the tomb, he comes back to life, we're good to go. So how do we know that he's actually dead when they say, look, there's some reason, there's some stuff in your Bible that makes me suspicious he's not really dead. Let's take a look at this verse in John. It says that he was executed with 2 other thieves, right? 2 thieves were next to him. And at the end of the day, they wanted to pull him off the cross. They came to the 3 men, and the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first guy. Then they broke the legs of the second guy. They didn't break the legs of Jesus. They made sure the first 2 were dead, but they didn't make sure that Jesus was dead. They didn't break his legs. Well, there you go. He's not dead. They just poked this guy with a spear. Now, but what's interesting, though, is out of his side came a sudden flow of blood and water. Isn't that interesting? And John, who's not Luke, Luke's the doctor, John's a fisherman. John says, yeah, I saw blood and water. Do you realize that that part of the verse, the blood and water part, has been a sticking point for the church? It was a sticking point for the church for the first 1,000 years. Nobody could understand why there would be a separation of blood and water. As a matter of fact, if you read the earliest commenters, the earliest church fathers who comment on John 19, they're like, no, that's not blood and water. It's got to be some metaphor that John is using. Like John's talking about something spiritually. He's talking about baptism or the Holy Spirit or some kind of form of... It's not really water, because why would water come out of his chest? The reason why, and by the way, I don't care who you read, if it's Origen or Tertullian or Jerome, these are the earliest Christian thinkers who are talking about this passage. They don't think it's water. Why? Because they don't understand the physiology of death. We do know it now, though. It turns out this expression is a piece of hidden science in the New Testament. That John didn't know what it was, but we now know what it is. If you arrive at a car accident just before someone passes away, or you're at an assault, a beating, and someone dies in front of you, you will see their body go through several stages of shock, where your organs start to shut down to reserve energy for the vitals. Now, that circulatory shock results ultimately, if you die, it will result in a cardiac arrest. And if you have a cardiac arrest, if your heart stops beating, you will suffer one of 2 forms of effusion. The first one is what's called pleural effusion, or pericardial effusion, rather, and it is around your heart. Now, I've been to lots of autopsies, and if you look at this, it's not quite as dramatic as that. The blood is not as, the water is not as thick as that. So if I was to stab your chest, it wouldn't look like blood and water, because you have a rich source of blood in your heart, a very thin layer of water. It's going to come out like thin blood. But if you happen to be in the right position, upright, for example, you can suffer pleural effusion, and that is in your lungs. Now there, if you have that, and I puncture your chest, you will see a separation of blood and water. But that means you've already suffered pleural effusion, because you've already suffered cardiac arrest. This demonstrates that Jesus is dead, and John didn't even know it. But he did include it in his observation. That's interesting to me. Now, here's the problem. Most of us don't understand what death looks like. Now, some of you do. Some of you in this room, you've investigated, you've had to touch dead people. So raise your hand if you're somebody who has to handle dead people a lot. Okay, great. Well, then you already know what I'm about to tell you. Dead people do not look like you see them on TV. They're not unconscious or still actors. Dead people are different. You can tell they're dead from across the room, am I right? Before you even get up and start touching them, you can tell they're dead because they look different. You and I don't know that, because when someone dies in our family, we call the mortuary. Mortuary comes and gets you. When's the last time you had to take your dead family member, package him or her, and bring him to the hospital or the mortuary? You don't do that. You call somebody. You call a coroner or you call a funeral home. But not in the first century. In the first century, you buried your own. You packaged your own. People in the first century knew how to give birth. They were midwives, and they were funeral homes. They would understand what death looks like. And I don't think most of us in this room know what death looks like. If you did, you'd know how silly the idea is that Jesus is just unconscious on the cross. Let me teach you about some things about death. This is the Los Angeles coroner's office. It's on North Mission Road. For years, in this beautiful building, you could walk up these stairs, and you could walk in this building, and over here to the right, behind that window, I just found out it closed. I was so upset. That used to be the Los Angeles County Coroner's gift shop. Oh my gosh, it was awesome. It was called Skeletons in the Closet. You can look it up. It's been closed now about a year and a half. So bummed. Because you could get T-shirts there. I have this shirt, so I'm so grateful I have it. Our bodies of work speak for themselves. Is that awesome? Or this mouse pad, it says, "We're dying for your business." That's awesome, right? You got to have a sense of humor about this. Now, if you go next door and downstairs, there's a big white building, and in the bottom of the white building are the examination rooms. This is where we do autopsies. Now, if you're assigned to a homicide in Los Angeles County as the IO, the investigating officer, the detective, you have to be present at the autopsy because the coroner is not going to testify at the prelim. He's too expensive. I'm going to testify for him at the prelim, but that means I have to be with him during the autopsy. So I've been to a ton of autopsies. They are a freak show, trust me. And I wish the examination room looked like this, but it doesn't. When I first started doing this in 1988, this was a wood table, I kid you not. Think about that. So you have what's the problem with a wood table? Wood's basically a sponge of sorts, right? I don't care how much marine lacquer you put on this. There's a reason why this is all metal with grooves, and there's a grate down here so you can wash it down. And you can never really wash those things down. And it smells terrible. The minute you get out of the elevator, it just smells like death. I mean, I'm still like hallways away from these rooms. And I have one suit that is my coroner's suit. I just wear that one suit because you can never get the smell of death out of it. I don't care what you do with it. It just stinks. So if I got to go to the coroner's office, I get my suit out, I put it in the trunk. When I get there, I put the suit on, and I go downstairs. But by the way, it's so amazing. People get conditioned to this kind of macabre stuff. There is a sign on the back wall behind this board here. There's a sign there that says, "No eating in the examination room." Like some dude is in there eating a sandwich, right? Like a liver sandwich, something like that. But the point is, would you do that? I wouldn't do that. But I tell you what, I kid you not, I was there one time, and one of the Igors, I hate to say Igor. Is there anyone here named Igor? Good. One of the guys who preps the bodies before the coroners do the work. He's eating a sandwich on a bench. He just cut all the scalps and heads off, and now he's eating a sandwich. Ice, I tell you. Now I want to show you what death looks like so you can see how ridiculous the claim that Jesus is not dead would be if you knew anything about death. It's called the mortis triad. These are the three inconvenient things that happen when your heart stops beating. The first thing that happens is you start to cool down. Your temperature drops. So if you walk up on somebody who's dead and you touch them, they are markedly cooler. If it's just been 30 minutes, they're going to be cool. Why? Because the hot blood that's being pumped through your system by your heart is no longer being pumped through your system, and you're going to begin to cool. So when you touch a dead person, you know this, folks, if you work with dead people, they feel cold. They start to feel room temperature. You'll notice that. That's called algor mortis. Also, you start to get stiff. If you're hanging on a cross and you die, and it takes me, remember, it was Joseph of Arimathea who wanted the body. So he went to Pilate, and he asked Pilate for the body. And in the Gospel of Mark, it says that Pilate said, well, first I got to make sure he's dead. And then it says, after they did that, then it says that Joseph of Arimathea went out and purchased the linen cloth. How much time is this taking? By the time you get him off the cross, his hands are not just going to drop back down by his sides because he's starting to suffer from rigor mortis. They're going to either slowly drop or have to be pushed back to his side. The worst thing, though, is that what happens when your heart stops pushing blood is that gravity starts to draw it toward the ground. So if you die on your back, and I get there and I roll you over, your back will be discolored. It'll be purplish and red because this is now settling, and that is called lividity or liver mortis. This is the mortis triad. So if you're in a position where you're standing and you die and your heart stops pushing blood, your feet will swell and turn color. So you're asking me, I mean, in a movie maybe you can get away with this, but in reality, to take his body off the cross, is it possible he's not dead? Nobody would notice that he was dead? I mean, really? Seriously? It's possible, but it's not reasonable. So I knew I had to cross that one out. And by the way, there's a reason why skeptics offer so many possible explanations. You know why they offer that many possible explanations? Because they know that none of them work. So the people who know this doesn't work, they go to explanation too. Maybe they're just lying about it. Now, somebody asked me earlier about conspiracy theories in COVID. So I'm going to tell you what my take on conspiracy theories. So I know a lot of you like conspiracy theories. You like to read about them and think about them and tweet about them and read other people's tweets. So how many here, just be honest, it's okay, it's a kind of a shameful pleasure. Raise your hand if you love conspiracy theories. Raise your hand, you like to watch the movies. Come on, you're lying to me. Raise your hand, I know you're out there. Okay, all you people with your hands raised, keep them up. Everyone look at these guys. These are idiots, okay? Is it possible to get away with a conspiracy? Yes. Does it happen often? No. And you know why? Because they're difficult. And I've learned over the years working conspiracies that they require 5 things to be successful. So I'm going to tell you the 5 things you have to pull off a conspiracy. By the way, if you think you know of a successful conspiracy, it wasn't successful by definition. The successful conspiracies are never discovered. So yes, we discover a lot of failed conspiracies, but that's not the issue. The issue is, did they successfully conspire? Well, here's what's required to successfully conspire. You ready? You need these 5 things. Number 1. Oh, by the way, let's do this here. Let me back up for a second. Do we have any kids who are siblings right now in the room? Raise your hand if we have siblings in the room. Okay, we have 2 siblings right here. How many siblings in your family? Just 2? 4. Where are the other 2? They're in the kids ministry. Okay, perfect. So how old are your siblings? 13, 11, and 10. And how old are you? 14, 13, 11. My goodness. That's awesome. Okay. Do you want me to help you? I can teach you something tonight. These are your parents sitting right here? Oh, awesome. Can I teach you how to lie to your parents? Would that be okay? I can teach you right now. You've got 4 siblings. You can conspire to lie to your parents if you listen to me. Okay, here's how you do it. You got to have these 5 things in place. First thing is you want to have the smallest number of co-conspirators. So what this means is you have 4. Don't use all 4. Just the 2 of you who happen to be hearing this message, the 2 of you are going to lie to your parents. That's it. Smaller, it's easier for 2 to lie than it is for 4. It's easier for 2 to lie than it is for 22. Smaller is better. Next thing you need. You want to hold that conspiracy for the shortest possible period of time. Got it? So here's the best way to do this. Conspire together to lie to your parents. As soon as you're done lying to your parents, one of you has to kill the other one. That is a great conspiracy. Because the minute you kill your sibling, it's not a conspiracy anymore. There's only one person who holds it. You need 2 or more for a conspiracy. Are you willing to do that right now? You are. I know. She says yes. He's like, what? Dude, do not sit that close to her. And don't ever turn your back on her. Okay, the point is, the third thing you need excellent communication. Because at some point, one of your parents is going to jam you up and say, hey, what's the deal with this? And then you're going to have to be able to make sure that your brother gives them the exact same story. So you need excellent communication to be able to communicate to him. This is why it's the first thing we do in an investigation. We separate these 2 knuckleheads. Because then we know we can get to that. We drill down as deep as we can into the questions, and then eventually we'll catch a difference. But you can't let that happen. You got to communicate with each other. Fourth thing you need strong family relationships. Like you have 3 siblings, him and 2 more. I have 6 siblings, okay? Now, I'll just be honest. You got 6 siblings? I like a couple of these. The other 4, not so much, okay? You have 3. There's like 1 or 2 you like, maybe 1. The other 2, not so much, right? Don't do the conspiracy with the other 2. Pick the guy you like. Make sense? Because the stronger the sibling relationship, the more likely you are to get away with it. Last thing. Try to avoid pressure. So don't let them even start asking questions. Don't give them any reason to ask questions. Avoid the questions and you'll get away with this. I just taught you how to lie to your parents, okay? Keep this in mind. Now, the reason why I give you this is because if you're telling me that the apostles conspired to lie about the resurrection, they'd have to have these 5 things in place. By the way, if you think an entire sector of the federal government has been lying to you over multiple generations, really? I just don't buy those kinds of things. At some point in a social media world, someone's going to give up the ghost. But here, do we think this happened with the disciples? Look, it's not just Peter and James and John who are lying about this. If this is a conspiracy, it's not even just the 12. There's 120 in the upper room in Acts 1 who are allegedly eyewitnesses. There's 500, Paul says, in 1 Corinthians 15, 3-8, that saw the risen Christ on the same day at the same time. Most of them are still alive, but some have fallen asleep. That's a big conspiracy. It's too big. So already I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. But let's play a little game together. Ever play this game, Clue? Okay, this is the old school Clue. This is the real Clue game, okay? Whatever you're playing is not the real Clue. That's the real Clue. But we're going to change ours too. We're going to make it like Jesus Clue. We're going to use the area around where Jesus did his ministry. Our game pieces will be the disciples. And in our game, we already think I have a problem. Too many game pieces. This is too large. But, okay, maybe they have other things in their favor. How long do they have to hold it? Shorter is better. 6 minutes? 6 hours, 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years. No, 6 decades. You want me to believe that 500 plus people were able to hold this together for 6 decades and nobody recanted? Nobody broke? Okay. Well, maybe they have excellent communication. No. As a matter of fact, they're not in this holy huddle right here. They're all over the game board. So tell me how it is that, like Thomas in North Africa, knows what the heck is happening or Thomas in India, knows what the heck is happening to Matthew in North Africa, who knows what the heck is happening to Paul. They can't communicate with each other. They can't Snapchat each other, okay? How do you communicate instantly to know? And by the way, I want to know what you're saying so I can repeat it. And no matter where we go, I showed you this morning, 3 different locations in the empire, Asia Minor, Rome, and North Africa, the story never varies. And how do they communicate this? Well, if you're just recalling the same set of events, you don't need to communicate it because you're telling the truth. This is just too many miles. And is there any pressure? You've played this Clue game. You know there's pressure in Clue, right? There's weapons. It's kind of like Jack Bauer in 24. Do you guys remember Jack Bauer in 24? Do you remember what would Jack do to get a confession? Whatever. Snap your fingers off, whatever it takes. We're doing that because we're going to get the confession. That's what Jack Bauer would do. That's what they were doing to these guys. They were torturing these guys. And they couldn't communicate with, you don't think they're saying what, they're the same cops haven't changed, okay? This dude's getting tortured and he's going, hey, dude, Matthew already gave it up. Tell me what really happened. These guys have already confessed. He can't check and see if they have. He can't communicate with them. Dude, give it up. Paul is drinking margaritas in Spain, okay? It's already over. Now, there's some brothers in here. There are. You got Peter and Andrew. You got James and John. They're brothers. But this dude over here, Matthew, he was not even a friend of the other guys. Remember that John the Baptist had a bunch of these guys as his disciples. And then when he saw Jesus, he gave his disciples to Jesus. And Peter and Andrew, they all went to Jesus. They were buddies. They knew each other, and they were expecting the Messiah. John the Baptist was talking about the Messiah all the time. Then he sees Jesus. There he is, the Lamb of God, takes away the sins of the world. And his guys go to them, go to Jesus. That's not this guy's story. This guy doesn't know any of those people. He's not even liked, okay? He's a tax collector named Levi who comes in last. And he's not and he never changes his story. He writes one of the earliest Gospels and dies a brutal death. This has been way too easy to break. And that's why I don't buy this whole conspiracy theory. Not just with Jesus and the disciples, but I don't buy many conspiracy theories, period. Because they're just too easy to break. Those 5 things are needed for successful conspiracies. So is it possible? I always say yes. If you ever ask me on the stand, Detective Wallace, is it possible that X? I will always say yes, but it's not reasonable. And they will strike the last part. But the point is, I always say yes to possible. Maybe the disciples, they imagined this. They so desperately wanted Jesus to be alive, and they felt so bad about the way he was treated that they imagined, and there are a couple of these single events, like Mary, she sees him at the tomb, and she thinks it's the gardener, and then she realizes, no, it's not the gardener, it's Jesus. No, Mary, it's the gardener. You think it's Jesus because you feel bad and you want it to be Jesus, and you are by yourself, so therefore it's an hallucination. And there's other people who saw Jesus. There's at least one sighting of Peter who sees Jesus. I'm sure Peter felt bad. We have this one sighting where he's by himself, and Luke is also mentioned in Corinthians 15. So maybe he imagined it. And other people, like James, his own brother, didn't really treat him that well when he was alive. We have a one-on-one here that's mentioned in 1 Corinthians 15 as well. I can imagine him imagining Jesus. Doesn't seem that unreasonable to me. But then you get to Paul. And I'm thinking, does Paul really want Jesus to be alive when he's the one who sees him on the road to Damascus? That doesn't seem like to really work. And then it gets even weirder, because now you have multiple people seeing the same thing, like the people on the road to Emmaus. There's more than one person here who's reporting the same thing for years afterwards. Now, hold on. If I told you I had a dream last night, and I'm driving a Tesla down Mulholland in Los Angeles, and you said, yeah, it was a red Tesla, right? How do you know that? It was a ragtop, beige. Top was down, right? How do you know that? You were listening to the radio, Ed Sheeran. How do you know that? If you can tell me the details of my dreams, that's going to freak me out, right? Because we don't have group dreams. The things we have as groups are called memories, okay? And we have a bunch of these. We have 2 here. We have the 3 Marys. There's too many people involved here. Are they having a group hallucination? Well, give me some example of what. That doesn't work. It gets even worse. You've got 7 at the sea. I can't even get them all in the same illustration, but I've got 5 of them at least, right? There they are. I'll give you the other 2. They're over there. In the upper room, later on, we've got no Judas. We got no Thomas. Remember, Judas is gone. Thomas isn't there. So now we have 10 who see the risen Christ. 10. Tell me how that works. Too many. Then, Thomas does show up, and so now we have a sighting with 11 who see Jesus. And then we have a bunch of these, we're not even sure how many they are. I mean, on the mountaintop, how many people are here? It says the disciples. It could be the apostles, or it could be the larger set of disciples, but at the very least, it's 11. That's weird to me. Then you have that scene I love so much. That's that scene where Jesus ascends into heaven. Hey, forget about the resurrection for a second. Forget about it. If all you had was a story about a guy who preached all this stuff and worked all these miracles, was born of a virgin, and then at the end of his life, he didn't die on the cross and rise from the grave. All he did was ascend into heaven. Would that be enough for you? I'm thinking that's enough for me. You do that, I'm in, okay? By the way, I think a lot of you in this room, if you could actually see the ascension of Jesus, you would have been in too. You want to see it? There he is. I can make it happen right now. Be amazing. Wouldn't it be amazing? Oh, you want to see it, don't you? You ready? You ready? 3, 2, 1. Whoop, there he goes. There you go. There should not be an unbeliever in this room now. Every one of you should be a believer. You just saw the ascension of Jesus, okay? There's at least 11 there. Clapping. No, they're praying. But then you have this passage in 1 Corinthians 15 where Paul says that he appeared to 500 of the brethren at one time. Most of them remain until now, but some have fallen asleep. 500 people who saw Jesus on the same day and reported it the same way. That is not, come on. How far are we willing to stretch this? I couldn't even get them all on the same page, so I'm going to add them. Now we're good to go. By the way, if you wanted to falsify this claim, if you thought, no, I don't believe you, you're hallucinating this, you are imagining this, it'd be very easy to prove you're just imagining it. Here's what you would do. You would run back to the tomb, because the tomb is going to have a body in it if you're just imagining it. Oh, no, the tomb is empty. Well, now we're back to conspiracy theory. Who got the body? And a lot of these roll back to conspiracy theory, and you already know why I don't trust that one. So this is why Paul tells us, look, we're not making this up. This is not a cleverly invented story. We're just reporting what we really saw because we were eyewitnesses. We've already talked about the value of eyewitness testimony, and that's what they claim to be. So is it possible? Yes, of course it's possible. I just don't think it's reasonable, and that's why I cross it off. Hey, maybe they were just fooled by an imposter. You know, somebody who stood in for them. I mean, think about it. Afterwards, he appears to be slightly different, right? Like people don't immediately recognize him on the road to Emmaus or in the garden. Well, maybe that's because you got an imposter who's standing in for Jesus now. Do you guys know who this is? Very, very famous guy. Con man. He can fool you. His name is Ponzi, Charles Ponzi. The famous name of the Ponzi schemes, right? After Charles. Con men, they fool you. They need two things in place to fool you. And I've worked a bunch of these too. And you need two things to con people. Number one, you need the confidence of the people you're trying to fool. That's why they're called con artists to begin with. You need to have their trust. And two, you need to know more about the thing you're fooling them than they do. If they know more about this business than you do, you're not going to fool them. But if you know more about business than they do, you might be able to fool them. So you need these two things, trust and knowledge. Trust and knowledge. So if you're telling me that someone has fooled the disciples, well, there had to be somebody from the inner circle who had their trust and also knew every word that Jesus said so he could repeat these things. He had that means I'm looking for somebody from the inner circle. Really, who's that going to be? And I need somebody to help him because I got rid of the body. Well, here's the problem with this theory. It turns out that the Jesus before the resurrection and the Jesus after the resurrection are both equally miraculous. How does that happen? In other words, after the resurrection, it's not like Jesus just comes and says, here I am. Pretty good, right? See you guys later. No, he's doing all kinds of supernatural things. He's appearing in rooms miraculously. He's healing people. He is actually rising from that rope thing, you know, like David Copperfield, right? He's rising into the air. How do you do these things? Who can impersonate Jesus yet still have the power of Jesus? Okay, it's possible. I just don't. And this is why there's so many are offered. This guy who believes this theory doesn't think that theory works, and vice versa. A new theory has emerged about 2 years ago. Here's the idea. Well, maybe one who had influence, maybe two, they saw Jesus, and they were so sure that they had seen the risen Christ that they were able to persuade the others that it was true when it wasn't. So I think, okay, so how does that happen? So which of these people has so much influence that they could the first person reported to see Jesus is Mary. Do you think Mary has the influence to influence the others? I don't think so. She tells everybody else, they're like, get out of the way, and they run to the tomb themselves. They don't even trust her that she saw the risen Christ. Yeah, you wouldn't make women your first witnesses. But do you really think that someone like Peter or any of these guys could actually, if it's Peter, for example, you tell me that Peter says, hey, guys, I saw Jesus yesterday. And Mary, you saw him before me. How does that work? Mary's the first seer of reporter, eyewitness of Jesus, not Peter, not James, and not anybody else in this group. That's the problem. And by the way, I've worked enough of these cases to know this. If you have a vision, let's say somebody has a vision, okay? Let's say it's Peter, and Peter is very convinced this happened, but it's just his own private vision. Okay, if that's the case, if I ask Peter, I say, Peter, tell me about your vision. He reports it and it's written down. Well, that detailed report will be crystal clear. You know why? Because he's the one who saw it. But as he passes it to others, now what happens is if I ask the others, okay, you heard about it too, right? They didn't really see it. They're just persuaded by Peter. Well, then when they recall it, there's less detail. Why? Because the person who invents the lie has all the detail of the lie. The person he tells it to can only go so far because he's not the inventor of the lie. Yet we have reports over a period of years. Remember, Mark is written decades before John. Probably 2 decades before John. yet the reports are all detailed. And by the way, again, you want to falsify it? It's easy to falsify. If it's just a vision by someone who's influential, well, just go back to the tomb, because he should be in the tomb. But he is not in the tomb. Again, this is what the problem with this is. How do you explain the empty tomb? So this is yeah, sure, it's possible. I don't think it's reasonable. Now, look, last thing I'm going to talk about is this. Is it possible that the stories of the disciples are just late legends? In other words, the first versions don't have a resurrection. The later versions of the gospel stories, there is a resurrection because they just are legendary accounts. I told you this morning, we had a session this morning. If you weren't here, I'm sorry. We talked about a couple of things we're going to review here, but I'm not going to review them that deeply. But here's what I will say. In order to be a late legend, you need to be two things: late and a legend. But we already know this is not late. And I showed you this morning. You can get the video from this morning. This morning we walked through and I showed you how early the Gospels were written. They're not late. And we also know they didn't change over time, because I showed you this morning the chain of custody, so I could show you they have not changed over time. We have good evidence to demonstrate that the Gospels are early and they never change. They're early and they never change. So this late legend thing, if you ask me, is it possible? I'm like, I hate to even say it's possible. It's not even possible. But okay, fine. For sake of argument, it's possible. But it's certainly not reasonable. Off it goes. Now we're down to your Christian explanation. Your Christian explanation is that they just accurately reported what they saw. He rose from the grave. Now, I will tell you this. Every time I look at a series of explanations, I recognize that explanations, even in criminal trials, all have strengths and weaknesses. Even my explanation as the prosecutor or as the investigating officer, I know that my case has weaknesses. My goal is to hide those weaknesses as much as I can. I'll be honest with you. So the defense knows that their theory has weaknesses. They're trying to hide the weaknesses of their theory. All of these theories have weaknesses, and they have strengths. So does yours. Yours has strengths, and it has weaknesses. Now, here's the strengths. The strengths are that your theory, your explanation, actually accounts for the evidence perfectly. All of this makes sense if your explanation is true. But here's the problem with your explanation, from my perspective as an atheist. Your explanation requires there to be a resurrection. Really? So you're telling me that the best explanation is a miracle? Something supernatural? I don't believe in supernatural. That's a stupid explanation. I would have said, no way. That can't be the best explanation because it involves something supernatural. But hang on. What are we really investigating tonight? We're really investigating this question. Are supernatural events, like the resurrection, ever the most reasonable explanation? No, they aren't, because I don't believe in the supernatural. No, stop. That's what we're investigating. Yeah, I get it. You think right now the answer is no. But that's what we're investigating. So you can't start off with the answer. You have to just relax. Calm down. We're going to investigate this together. I don't care. I don't believe in resurrections. No, that's the thing we're investigating. Well, you know what? If you're not willing to move on that, I can show you evidence. I've been showing you evidence all day for the reliability of Scripture. I'll show it to you. You'll find a way to jump over it. It's written early. Don't care. Don't believe in resurrections. Well, okay. Well, how about this? It's quoted by the earliest students of I showed you that, right? The chain of custody. Don't care. Don't believe in resurrections. You'll jump over that. Well, I can confirm a lot with archaeology alone, confirms so much of the New Testament. Don't care. No matter what I show you, you will find a way to jump over it. You know why you're doing that? Because you want to end up right here. You want to end up that miracles are not reasonable. And why do you want to end up there? Because that's where you started, and you don't want to move. That's the truth of it. So no matter what I do, we're going to end up where we started. Do you see how frustrating this can be? There is a reason why we started this talk tonight with this picture. If you think you know the answer before you start and you're not willing to go beyond your result, you will stay at your result. You won't even pull down the blankets because you think you know the answer. Do you see the problem with that? So when it comes to the resurrection, you have two choices, folks. Here it is. What happened to Jesus? Well, either he rose from the grave or he didn't. That's it. Now, if you want to get to this side, if you're trying to convince me that this is true, that he rose from the dead, I'd have to consider all possible explanations, including supernatural explanations. I'm not doing that because I don't believe in the supernatural. So I can't get there. That roadblock is in my way. But as I examine all the naturalistic explanations, none of these work. I didn't care. I'd find some way to hop over these, or go around these, or dig under them, because I wanted to get over here. And it didn't matter to me that all of these had deal-killing fatal flaws. It didn't matter. I just needed to get over here. Now just take a look at this for a second. Which of these two paths is least encumbered? Clearly, it's the one on the left. The only thing in that path that blocks me, I put there. It doesn't need to be there. I could easily take it down. Oh, no. I don't believe in the supernatural. Well, yeah, but that's on you. Look, I get it. This is why I showed you last night. When you realize that, as an atheist, I held to Big Bang cosmology. In other words, that everything in the universe, all space, time, and matter, came into existence from nothing. There was no space before space, no matter before matter, no time before time. The science is telling us that. Kind of sounds like Genesis 1, doesn't it? So you already know if there's something outside of space, time, and matter that is the first cause of all space, time, and matter, well, you're already outside the natural room. You're already outside of naturalism. You believe in at least one extra natural reality, one extra natural event, and that opens the door to everything else. So I realized at some point I could pull that down. And if I pull it down, this is by far the most reasonable explanation. It has the least fatal flaws. So I realized at some point that, hey, the only thing standing between me and the truth of Christianity was me. And for a lot of you in this room who come to these things because your spouse forces you to come or your parents force you to come, that's probably you too. There are good reasons to believe in Christianity, not despite the lack of evidence, no, because of the evidence. You can believe this is true because of the evidence, which is why Jesus often said it that way. If you don't believe, Peter said, you killed a man who was attested to you by miracles, including the resurrection. He proved who he was on the basis of the evidence of the resurrection. Won't have time to do a Q&A with you. So remember, you're going to get all the stuff that we talked about at our website. This is our phone app. I answer questions there. You're going to go. By the way, we also have a NRB TV show. Every Monday and Saturday, we're on NRB TV for the 4 of you in this room who have direct TV. I know is it direct or dish? I think it's direct. Like 4 of you have that. So the 4 of you who have that should at least watch the show because it's on twice a week. And we have a YouTube channel that has over 600 videos posted on all of these topics. So you can watch them. And we have books back here. I'm only saying that because I feel bad for these folks who bring all these books out, and I want them to get rid of them. And I'm so glad I'm not selling books because I hate to sell books. Like I said last night, I used to not trust Christians because all they were doing was selling books. And here I am selling books. So I will send you a bunch of free stuff. Here it is. Remember, you're going to text the word detective, to the number 66866. Just text the word detective to 66866, and I will send you links to everything we talked about tonight. That being said, where is Matt? There he is. Good. Awesome. Let's take some questions. We have a few minutes. By the way, the first question is always the hardest, so we will skip it and go to question number 2. Just raise your hand. Or if you want to make it faster, we can do all Q and no A. Yeah, he'll get you.
Okay, who's got
your hand? Raise your hand and he'll ask a question.
I got my shoes on now, so I can run.
Okay, good. He'll get a mic.
We're skipping it. Okay, number 2.
No, I'm just kidding. No. You said your father wasn't a Christian yet. He was a number 4, and you prayed him to a number 3.
Yes.
How about your son?
Oh, my son, yeah. My son's, as a matter of fact, if you go on our website, his name is Jimmy. I was Jimmy before Jimmy was born. So I was irritated that I lost my name to this kid. So for a while, I tried this little Jimmy thing. He was little Jimmy. Now he's just Jimmy. So if you go on our website, you'll see that we have articles written by Jimmy Wallace. That's not me. That's my son's. He does a podcast called The Incarnate Investigation. And he's got articles as well. Go ahead.
Are you still working as a detective or as an apologist?
So right now, I'm doing just this, but I am always asked to come back. And I've been thinking recently that a couple of cases are still open. We solved one last year. So I'd like to go back and finish 2 more that I started, but I never finished. And we don't have a cold case team anymore. So they would love to have somebody come and work for free, which I'm willing to do. So that's probably what will happen at some point.
What's compelling to you about those 2 cases?
Well, so one was a teenage girl who was killed in her junior year, and I went to school with her. So a lot of the suspects in that case are people I went to school with. So I'd kind of like to solve that one. But that's from 1981. It's getting old, and it's going to get harder to solve. And the other one is a case that is another child. And when children are the hardest ones that you feel like you want to solve those.
Another question. Gosh, concentrated right here.
Okay, you have 6 brothers or 6 siblings?
Yes.
Do any of them know the Lord?
Yes.
And your mother?
I was, and my mom, yes, also. I baptized my mom after I got saved. Yeah. So that's cool.
Anyone else?
This is awesome. We want Matt to run like last night. So somebody over on that side, get ready to raise your hand. Even if you have no questions, say, I forgot.
How long were you a detective, and were you only in Los Angeles?
I was only in Los Angeles. I did, so my path was 4 years in patrol, 2 years street narcotics called Metro Team, 3 years in SWAT, 4 years undercover, and then the rest of it working robbery homicide.
Wow. They followed your instructions.
Yeah, isn't that awesome? And once he gets there, say, oh, dang it, I forgot. Get ready, the same thing on this side in a second.
So my question is, looking for something to share with my daughter who grew up as a believer, saved, like she shared the gospel all through high school and married her high school sweetheart who just over the years just picked and just destroyed her faith. He's very intellectual, love him. She finally agreed a couple days ago to, she's like, I'm not going to read anything, but I suppose if you want to send me something to watch, I will have Joe, Joe and I will watch it. Is there anything that you would recommend just to start?
So there's a ton of good stuff out there. The problem is it may not be the issue is rational or intellectual. So there are 3 reasons why someone shuns the truth. I use that word shun, S-H-U-N, but I use it in a twisted way. The first way people shun the truth is they have rational objections. Okay? And that usually comes out, they'll say things like, oh, I've done the investigation, I don't believe in miracles, I got this, they'll say. But the second reason people shun the truth is emotional. They've had an experience. They're in love with somebody who hates this. This is an emotional response. They may just say, hey, people in the church are such hypocrites. Well, that says nothing about the evidence for Christianity. That's purely an emotional response to people. The third is volitional. They don't want it to be true because they've got something else. They want to be in charge of their own lives. Now, it turns out, if you look at this, I suspect that almost all objections are not rational. They're emotional or volitional, probably volitional, masquerading as one of the other 2. So someone can say, I just don't think there's any evidence for this, but that's not their issue. They're just saying that because it sounds crazy to say, I don't want it to be true, right? So they're going to say, I don't think it's evidentially true. When in fact, what it is they don't want it to be true because they've got some issues in their life they don't want it. That's my dad. It's a volitional issue. He doesn't want it to be true. There's more than enough reason. Look, we have the exact same pedigree. I can show him all this stuff. He knows this stuff, but he doesn't want it to be true. So I think sometimes we've got to be careful because we can say, okay, I'll give you this. And they'll find a way to say, oh, yeah, but. So you show them another video. Oh, yeah, but. So I would just ask him, if someone, for example, if Christianity was demonstrably true, would you be a Christian? if Christianity was absolutely demonstrably true, oh, but it's not. No, I'm saying it's a thought experiment. If it was demonstrably true, would you be a Christian? No. Okay, well, then you know it's not a head issue. It's a heart issue. So I'd probably have those kinds of conversations first. If it was true, would you follow Jesus? If it was true that he rose from the grave, would you follow him? No. Well, now you got a different approach you got to take. So I would ask those questions first. Make sense? Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Question about Holocaust denial theory.
Okay.
And I think there's a Jewish gal, I don't know if her name is, I think it's Deborah Threadstad.
Okay.
And a detractor, James Irving, I think. And anyway, but what she is, as a Jewish lady, uses as proof positive of the Holocaust is that we have people still living between age 85 and 110 who are eyewitnesses.
Okay.
So my question is, if proof of the Holocaust would be eyewitnesses, and if we reach out to persons of the Jewish persuasion who are not Christians, and there are over 500 witnesses, eyewitnesses of the resurrection, shouldn't it logically follow, you know, if they're acting in good faith, shouldn't a Jewish person also embrace that?
Well, first of all, when you say Jewish, we've got to make some distinctions. So I work in Los Angeles County where the DA's office is dominantly Jewish. The DAs I work with are dominantly Jewish, but does not mean they're religious Jews. They're culturally Jewish. They celebrate the holy days, but they don't believe in God. So you're back to the same barriers. So the reason why they would claim their Jewish identity is because of the identity of their community. And to move them from that identity, if the identity being to say that I'm part of this Jewish community is what holds you there, that's the thing that's holding you there. It's not a belief in a form of God. They're not anticipating the Messiah. I think I showed you John Lewin this morning, who's my best friend in the DA's office. He's Jewish, but he doesn't believe in God. So it's not like I'm asking him to, hey, this is the Messiah. He doesn't believe in the Messiah. So there's the issue. Are they religiously Jewish, or are they simply culturally Jewish? And most cultural Jews are not believers. They're atheists.
I would just tell parents to go get your kids if you haven't already, and this will be the last question.
Perfect.
So thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
One question, so if you go back to, and you might have shared this as part of your testimony, or maybe I could find it, but if you go back to before you were even thinking about Christianity and whether it was true, what kind of, did somebody challenge you, or was it somebody, it was always in the back of your mind, or did something put a chink in your confident armor, or what kind of kick started to where you got serious about looking at it?
So some of you know the answer to this. So I don't usually share my testimony because it doesn't matter. And your testimony doesn't matter either. What matters is it true? So my Mormon brothers and sisters, 6 Mormon brothers and sisters, a couple of them are now Christians, but they can share their testimony like a few other people I know. That does not make Mormonism true. Their testimonies are spectacular. They had an experience of the Holy Spirit that confirmed for them that Joseph Smith's a prophet of God and the Book of Mormon is true, yet you don't believe that. I get it. Why should they believe our testimony? So here's how I became a Christian. I had no interest, but my wife did. And she was like, hey, we got kids now, 6 and I think 5 and 7. Hey, we should go to church to raise our kids. Why? We've been together 18 years at that point. Why? Okay, if you want to, I guess. So I was like my dad. My dad will go to church with you. He loves a country founded on Christian principles. He does not think Christianity is true, but he thinks it's a very useful delusion. He would much rather live in the Christian delusion than any other way. So he would go to church with his wives. I would go to church because it makes Susie happy. It took her 3 years, but I did go because I thought it'd make her happy. If it makes her happy, I'm willing to go along with the program. But when I got in there, this knucklehead said that Jesus was the smartest man who ever lived. And I thought, that can't be. Then he said this. He said, as a matter of fact, from just a couple of sermons of Jesus of Nazareth, the entire moral system of Western civilization has been founded. And I'm like, oh, come now, really? I'm enforcing laws in California that this guy says began in sermons from Jesus of Nazareth. So that can't be true. So I bought a Bible to read the red letters to see if that was true. And that's what started this whole thing for me. Nothing was broken. I'm not a Christian because it works for me. It doesn't work for me. It stinks most of the time. You know that. Well, maybe you don't know that. In California, it stinks most of the time. Seriously, it's not popular. Every moral teaching of Jesus of Nazareth has been kicked to the curb. By the way, if you think that people, just hear me on this, if they hate the moral teaching of your master, do not be fooled. They hate your master. Seriously. It used to be people would say, I don't like, I like Jesus, but I don't like Christians. They don't even like Jesus anymore. They don't want to hear what he had to say. I'm a Christian because it's true. I would rather be in an inconvenient truth than in a convenient lie. So we stay firm. We're going to suffer. Let me just close with this thing. All week, it's been great with you. 2 days with you. Thank you so much for having me. But I will tell you this. We will suffer. Jesus said this in the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the gentle. Blessed are the people who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who will be persecuted because of Jesus. He says, blessed are you when, not if, when people persecute you, insult you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. That's coming. It's happening now. And Jesus said, sorry, that stinks. No, he didn't. He said, rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Why do they persecute those prophets? Because they spoke the words of God into a world of fallen humans. And if you'll do that, you will be persecuted and insulted on Twitter tomorrow. And if you're not being insulted, it's because you're not speaking the words of God into a fallen world. So let's speak the words of God. Amen? Thank you, guys.
Hey, stay up here. All right. I can't think of a better way to close out the conference. That's good stuff. And this is what we're going to be about going forward, which is just equipping believers to stand for truth in a world that hates Jesus. Okay? And hopefully you're on board with that. I appreciate Jim's last words. Usually we pray for our speaker, their last session, so I'm going to pray for you, Jim. Lord, thank you for bringing Jim to us. Thank you for the sessions that he's given us, and I pray that we would be inspired to stand firm and to defend the faith and to do the hard work that we need to equip ourselves to represent you and defend what we believe against an onslaught of different opposing views that we come in contact with in our families, in the world, in our workplace, in education systems. And Lord, I pray a specific blessing on Jim. I know he hates being away from his wife, and so I pray that you continue to bless their marriage and bless his travel back home tomorrow. Also want to pray for his dad. It would be awesome if you would just take down that volitional barrier in his heart so that he would come to know Christ. Thanks for the faith of his mom and his son Jimmy and the work that they're doing together in ministry and others. Pray that you continue to give him great impact on the airwaves, in social media, and live in front of people like this, and that you would protect him from the arrows of the enemy, and that you would make him more and more effective as time goes on. And we thank you for this guy. We pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. We're going to take a 10-minute break. And then we're going to be back here with Christy Knuckles. She's going to do another mini concert starting in 10 minutes. Clear out the concession stand, get some What's Poppin'. And if you're not going to watch the concert, you just want to hang out and talk, go do that outside, please, instead of in here. That'd be awesome. Thanks. And if you don't come back for the concert,